is philosophy? I wanted to talk about the process of philosophy a little bit more. I know that there's a lot of people talking about 5 different branches of philosophy. I think that's a fine way of looking at it, but I think that that's also not looking at the thing we often think about when we say philosophers, at least when we talk about those such as Socrates or Descartes. What we mean now by a philosopher is someone who works on this process that I'm about to lay out. The thing is, I didn't like the terms that were out there currently for philosophy. You get some valid ones, such as logic or ethics, but then you also get some that I think are just out there to have a big word. For instance, epistemology. What is epistemology? Well, that's complicated because it's really a lot of stuff. And it doesn't need a big word. It needs a couple of words. It's more of a concept than a specific definable thing. So I decided to lay out my own terms of what philosophy is. And while I was writing out these terms, I realized that philosophy, at least the way I view it, is more of a process than a set of thoughts. It breaks down from the most fundamental to the more and more assumption-based. So let's get into it. Virumology. This is a new word, not the first new word I have made up. I think it might be the third within Hasemage, if you include infinite complexity, though that's not one word, that is a concept I've made. Stepple being a couple of steps, either up or down, but you have to add that up or down part separately. And now virumology. Virum is the Latin term for reality or truth. If you put it into Google, simply tell you it's truth. There's several Latin terms for reality. I simply chose the easiest to remember, I think. Also the most straightforward, since virum, though I think it's more often associated with truth, it really does only mean real things in that it's truthful as in it exists, rather than it's truthful as in that is a true statement. Something like, that's really cool, if you wanted to say that in Latin, you probably wouldn't use virum. Ology, of course, is simply the study of. Now, if you're wondering why I didn't use Greek, as many people like to with these philosophical terms, that's because the Greek word for reality, or real, is about 12 characters to 20 characters. Obviously not very rememberable. Also, it doesn't translate into English that well, or Latin characteristics that well. So, the result is a lot of letters, not very many vowels. So, virumology, pretty much the study of reality. Do we exist? The thing that Descartes got so stuck up on. Philosophy, I think, does build off of this. The question, do I exist? There is no more fundamental question besides, perhaps, is there exist, perhaps? But that's almost the same question. This is the most fundamental thing. This is the thing which has no assumptions, the study, the knowledge which builds off of itself and nothing else. Any point further than this is based on assumptions. Even if it's not assumptions we consciously make, these are assumptions which are being made implicit within the considering of these ideas. As you can see, the next one is faith, and then after that is logic. These two are in a category. But in order to get to either of these, you have to accept exist, I exist, things like others exist, and world exists. When you look at different philosophical concepts, you can say, well, this assumes that others exist, that I exist, that an observer exists, that someone who's not me exists, and that's just for a more basic thing. So the next one is faith. And I don't mean this purely in the religious context. Faith is often considered as things which are purely related to religion, and that's not true. Faith are things which you take as true without having applied logic to decide that they are true. Now, you can argue what logic is, but faith, at least, you have to accept as the things which you believe without having evidence to believe. And oftentimes, religion is not a faith by the philosophical definition, because individuals who are of a religion apply a logic to their belief system. They have reasons which allow them to decide that their religion is the best path. That means that their religion at that point is no longer a faith. Philosophically, faith is simply the things which you assume without having applied logic to them. For many people is, I exist, others exist. I can trust my perceptions of reality. That's a big one. There's also other things like, there is goodness, there is evil. Oftentimes, these are things that we do not doubt, at least not until later, when we've gotten to think about things a bit more. So, as you can see, faith leads to logic. This series, you'll notice that it's been building off of each other. As soon as you accept that there is existence and that you exist, you can start having fundamental beliefs about that existence, without evidence, but these beliefs, I think, inherently lead you to wanting to know why you believe this. And once you've decided that you believe this for the correct reasons, at that point, those are no longer beliefs, but logical views. Now, logic can be anything. There is probably some sort of inherent logic in the way people think, but as it stands, the best way I can say about logic is that it is any method which is applied to faith in order to figure out whether or not it is trustworthy, if that makes sense. As you can see, this leads to morality. Once we've decided our logical views, we hit morality, which is oftentimes where I am, considering my own philosophical principles in this morality stage, where I've considered my logical views, but now I need to decide how this applies to the best life. Perhaps a good life, but then perhaps you're a hedonist and you do not believe that a good life is a best life. So I say the best life. So I say the best life to live. It's not much after this in terms of pure philosophical processes. After you've decided the best life to live, you hit ethics, or as some people put it, politics or politica or something of the sort. But ethics, as opposed to morality, is societal based. Once you've decided the best life, you then must decide the best way for the most number to live that best life. Many people who get to the stage of ethics understand that most are not considering the morality of actions. They may consider the ethics of actions, how all people should react, rather than how they specifically should act. This is the last stage I've put on this list, although it's not the end of philosophy, certainly. Ethics is deciding how morality should be applied to all, and oftentimes we have to accept that a perfect good person, or at least a good person if a good person is not a perfect person, is not what all people should be. But I think we can all accept that the best ethical system is the system which focuses on the best possible for all individuals who it applies to, though perhaps that's simply my own American utilitarianism at work, and that it's more about the most number being the best, even if that most number does not apply to the largest number. So the most number being the most perfect, but this is something for another day. As you can see, under that comes the specific philosophical values. These include axiology, I think I'm pronouncing that right, which is the study of values. Aesthetics, which is often put in as one of the fundamental pillars or branches of philosophy, and although that's sort of true, it's also very different from the others, and I don't think really belongs there as much as one of the later studies, one of these studies that you have to go through these other assumptions first to get to, and that is the study of beauty. And then there is also others such as cosmology, which some would argue is a more scientific than philosophical belief, but I would argue that philosophy literally translates as a love of knowledge, so any who love science also love philosophy. And that is the study of origin. Of course, there's many more, but I just wish to point out that these are the later assumptions. They don't have to be taken later. You can jump straight to cosmology, or to axiology, or to aesthetics, or any of the such. But from a purely process of philosophical thought perspective, you start with theoremology, move to faith, then to logic, then to morality, then to ethics, then you go into other study. I tend to focus on morality. At one time in my life, though, I have gone to all of these, and I often like to touch on all of them at least a little bit. But primarily, from my philosophy series, as I'm sure you've been seeing, I tend to focus on morality.